Everest or Everest? Were Norgay and Hillary really the first two to summit? Do you call it Sagarmatha, Chomolungma, or Everest? I am your host, Pauline Reynolds-Nuttall of the All About Everest podcast since 2021. Join me weekly for all things Mount Everest, including updates, features, interviews, trivia, and so much more. It doesn't matter if you are an adventurer or an armchair mountaineer. There's something here for everyone as long as you love the mountain. Hi there, and welcome to today's episode of the All About Everest podcast. Today's episode is part one of the spring 2024 climbing season on Mount Everest. It'll be part one of your recap, and next week will be part two. It's a bit of a mixed bag. I have a lot to cover, and I had actually recorded parts of this back in April. I like to keep the episodes shorter rather than longer, and usually under 30 minutes. So for today's episode, I will have this week's book for my 52-week mountaineering book challenge, which I have stuck with even though I haven't been recording since March. And you can find a full list on my website with the link in the episode summary. I will also talk about who I follow during the Everest season, some books and movies that are coming out, and of course, part one of the recap. Next week's episode will be part two, and it will have all of the juicy stuff, all of the records and everything like that. Also, bear with me because Spotify has changed its recording tools. And so now I'm stuck trying to find something that works better. I am not good at editing. I think we've all come to that conclusion. I didn't take that class in high school, and I find it absolutely tedious. So let me know if the quality of this episode is worse, better. I would really appreciate your feedback. Because it has been a while, a huge shout out to my mother. I have mentioned this quite frequently. She has dementia, and this is really the only way I can still connect with her. She doesn't recognize me when I call. She doesn't really remember me. However, she does listen to every single episode, though she really has no idea that I'm the one behind the microphone. This week's mountaineering book from my list of 52 mountaineering books is Hidden Mountains by Michael Wedgert. So I have not had time to complete this book. It's just because we're going camping this weekend. Camping season started. Yay! And I have only really gotten into the very beginning of it, probably not even a third of the way through. But in 2018, two couples went out on an expedition to Alaska's Hidden Mountains. It's very remote. It's an area that hasn't really been explored. It's completely wild and for the most part untouched. And there's an incident, and one of the four gets hurt really badly. And really, this is their survival story. As everybody knows, going into the outdoors in the backcountry, going on any mountaineering expedition, there's always going to be danger, and it can go wrong in so many different ways. So that is the book that I chose for this week. As an outdoorsy person, I am always looking to up my outdoor game. I have two favorite products that I've discovered in the last couple of years, and they are kind of my go-to. The first one is the Nomadic Outdoor subscription box. It starts at $29.99, and they have monthly and quarterly plans. I have discovered cool outdoor brands by getting this box, and brands that I would never have purchased on my own, including introductions to gear that I didn't even know existed. It's a great way to get new affordable gear and discover new brands as well. Check out thenomadic.com. That's thenomadic with a K.com. My other favorite product is through mymedic.com. I used to have a hard time finding the perfect first aid kit for home, the great outdoors, the car, and my short-term rental. But with MyMedic, I have found the perfect first aid kit for each of my needs and endeavors. My favorite go-to is the MyMedic Hiker Medic Kit that we use for camping, backpacking, hiking, and off-roading. You can also restock the stuff that you've used through MyMedic as well. Both links are affiliate links, and I may earn a small commission from them if you click on the links that are included in the show description. Before I begin the recap, I just wanted to cover some of the books and movies that have come out so far this year or will come out later this year about Mount Everest. We have the book Fallen, George Mallory and the Tragic 1924 Everest Expedition, written by Mick Conifrey. Those of you that have been following mountaineering for a while are probably familiar with his books. He's written several about Mount Everest and many about mountaineering. It's a really good book, and I think anyone should add it to their mountaineering and also their Mount Everest collection. And it is available for purchase. It came out back in May, and you can find it on Amazon, pretty much anywhere, any bookstore. The next book I just heard about recently, and it just came out. It's called Everest 24, with a foreword by Norbu Tenzing, and it's about the 1924 Everest expedition. So if you're just tuning in or just becoming familiar with the Everest stories, I guess you would call them, in 1924, George Mallory and Sandy Irvine were part of this expedition led by the British to attempt to summit Mount Everest. There were other teams as part of this bigger team, and George Mallory and Sandy Irvine were partners. The reason why Sandy was chosen and he didn't have a lot of mountaineering expertise was because he was a tinkerer and he was very mechanically inclined. And so he had come up with this better oxygen system. And George Mallory felt at the time, and he was right, that the best way to climb these mountains was using oxygen. So the two headed out, and they were never seen again until in 1999, George Mallory's body was discovered because a team led by Conrad Anker, they were actually looking for the body of Sandy Irvine because Sandy had a camera with him, supposedly. I believe it was a Kodak. It may have been a Nikon. And if they had reached the summit, it's very likely that there are pictures on that camera, but they still haven't found Sandy. But they did find George Mallory, and he had a rope tied to him that looked like it had been snapped. His ankle looked as if it had been broken, and they found letters on his body, and they were able to identify him because there was a little label in the back of his shirt that said George Mallory. So this year, it's 100 years since that fatal 1924 expedition, and that's why you've probably heard a lot about it this year, and multiple books have come out about this expedition. Everest Inc. by Will Cockrell really gets into the nitty-gritty of the commercialization of mountaineering and taking clients up Mount Everest. It's a very good book. I finished it. You guys, it's nothing like any of the other books out there. Will does an amazing job, and I have learned so much more about all of these people that I hear about or that I've interviewed. I totally encourage you to purchase it. It is available on audio, Kindle, paper, and hardback. I do not believe it's paperback. We also have Everest Mountain Guide, The Remarkable Story of a Kiwi Mountaineer by Guy Cotter. It came out last year, and you guys know that I was able to score a copy because my amazing sister purchased it in New Zealand, hauled it back with her to China, hauled it to the South Pacific, and mailed it to me. And so many people here in the U.S. have been asking where they can get this book. Well, guess what? I found a place where you can get it. It's a store out of Vermont. They're online, and I've never heard about them before, which I don't know why I haven't, because what their specialty is books, magazines, things like that in print. They may even be rare, about mountaineering and Mount Everest and the Himalayas. And the store is called Top of the World Books. I will leave a link for you guys in the comments. And really, it seems like they just have a trove of mountaineering and expedition books. So that's where you can get it. It is a little pricey. It's at $49.95 plus shipping, but that's also what you would find it for on eBay, which you can purchase it there as well. And that is the price. That is the price that is written on the actual book that was purchased in New Zealand is $49.95. A little pricey, definitely worth it. Guy Cotter, amazing man, amazing story. And I don't know if I could be that resilient after losing both of my mentors in less than a year, the whole tragedy of losing so many of your team on Mount Everest, and going on and making the company even better than it was. So check it out if you can. Again, you can purchase it at Top of the World Books, and I would definitely sift through what they have, because I saw some of the books that they have, and they're out of print books. Mallory Irvine and Everest, The Last Step But One by Robert Edwards. I haven't touched this book yet. I just heard about it. And again, it's about the 1924 Mallory and Irvine expedition to Mount Everest, and did they really reach the top or not? Quest Everest VR is now available, and it was released on May 16th for Oculus. It's about a 30-minute virtual reality video that you can access on the Oculus. It's pretty amazing. The kids tried it out. They really loved it. And now they understand a little bit more of why people climb Mount Everest. The Mountain Queen documentary will be coming out on July 31st on Netflix. That's going to be really exciting. Lakwa Sherpa, she holds the record for the most summits by a female, local and Westerner. There's no one else out of any of the women in the world that have this record or even come close to it. I'm really looking forward to it. And the Quest Everest movie will be released on July 15th. I don't know if you guys remember, but I did an interview with Alex Hars a while back regarding both his Quest Nepal movie documentary, the Quest VR, and the Quest Everest documentary. One of the biggest questions that I got last year and the beginning of this year was, who do I follow for news and media about Mount Everest? And that's a really good question, because there's quite a few. So first of all, and he's the king of Everest coverage, and I talk about it all the time, Alan Arnett. He just does it better than anyone else. And if I can ever even get close to his quality, I will be a happy person. Alan Arnett has been covering the Everest climbing season since 2004 and climbing in general for many years, but a focus mainly on Everest and the Himalayas. He starts his coverage the beginning of January and goes from bi-weekly articles to daily ones. You can find him on YouTube or listen to his podcast. He really goes into depth, and some of his annual articles are considered the expert ones, including his annual How Much Does It Cost breakdown that he posts every year. He posts frequently during the summit window on his social media, and I almost wonder if he just doesn't sleep for 2 months. He does a wonderful recap. He's very knowledgeable. And this year he also had a new podcast series. I believe it was 14 episodes, and it was a fictional storytelling of the trek to EBC and Everest. Explorers Web, they're a really good resource as well. I didn't follow them as much this year, but I follow a lot of their articles, especially when it comes to the Himalayas. There are 2 writers that cover Everest. Angela Benavides and Chris Annapurna are the 2 that to follow. You can subscribe to Explorers Web or follow on social media for links to all of their articles. Angela has been covering Everest and the Himalaya for years. Her updates are well written. I actually prefer when she does opinion pieces more than her updates. And Chris Annapurna is newer to the game and has been writing for Explorers Web for about a year, almost 2 now, I think. And her pieces are gritty and controversial, and I love them. I can't wait to see how she covers Everest in the coming years. I hope that she stays with Explorer's Web. The Himalayan Times does have some good articles during the climbing season, but doesn't particularly follow the goings-on at Everest or EBC. Kenton Cool, and I mentioned him last episode, and he currently holds the record for the most summits on Mount Everest by a Westerner, male and female. He also has an Everest climbing podcast, and it's more interviews than anything else. I love his style, and he's been podcasting since 2020. And I think it started out as an alternative to being unable to travel and summit Everest back in 2020 because everything was shut down due to COVID. And he turned 50 last year. He's turning 51 next month, and he's still mountaineering at full blast. All right, so the very beginning of my recap, because I kind of went in a little loop and got into some of the other stuff, which is just as important. For this year, there were a total of 421 permits issued to foreign climbers on the Nepali side, and about 500 Sherpa permits. As of right now, there were approximately 600 summits. The first summit of the season was Ukrainian climber Valentin Savin on May 11th. May 19th and May 21st were the largest summit days, with 100 and 104 summits respectively. Last year, there were 655 total summits from Nepal and 13 from Tibet. 478 permits were issued in 2023. And they start that list, it starts getting released almost daily in February. And the numbers just keep going up and up and up. I believe there was one Israeli who was on the list this year. I wonder who it was. And as usual, 2/3 of the list were men and 1/3 were women. For the permits for Mount Everest this year, it was 421 total permits, 76 female clients, 345 male clients. So it was actually a little more than 2/3, with a total of 45 teams. As of the end of 2023, there had been a total of 11,996 summits and a total of 327 deaths. Last year was the most fatal on the actual mountain with 17 deaths. We do have the 2014 Surak that fell in the Khumbu Icefall, and if I remember correctly, it was 15 deaths, and then in 2015 there were 17 deaths at base camp, but not on the mountain. And so last year in 2023 it was 17 deaths on the mountain, making it the deadliest spring season on Mount Everest and the most deaths on Everest in a year. It blows my mind. And many of those deaths could have been prevented, at least half of them. For 2024, there were a total of 8 deaths, and the climbing season and the summit window in general, it was a little bit later than normal, and I'll go into more detail in just a little bit of why. The first death was on May 13th, the Mongolian climber Usik Jargal Sendendamba, 53, climbing with 8K expeditions. On May 22nd, there were 4 deaths. Nawang Sherpa, climbing with 7 summit treks. Kenyan Charyut Kirwi, climbing with 7 summit treks. Pastenje Sherpa, climbing with 8K expeditions, and the British climber Daniel Paul Patterson, climbing with 8K expeditions. On May 23rd, there was another death, Nepali, and he was not a Sherpa, Vinod Babu Bastakoti, and he was climbing with Yeti Adventure and Pioneer Adventure. And then on May 29th, Indian Banshi Lal, he died in Kathmandu, but he had been evacuated several days before that because of altitude sickness, and he had been climbing with 8K expeditions. Less than half from last year. It astounds me. And last year, the main reason why there were so many deaths was because of the extreme cold. There were some very, very questionable decision-making from some of the teams. I mean, there were clients that were just abandoned there. Very poor decision-making. And there may or may not have been illness that people decided, instead of staying back at EBC, that they were going to try to overcome that illness and climb the mountain. And that is just rumors, and no one who is willing to confirm that that is what really happened. The beginning of this season was a bit scandalous, if you will, because there always has to be a little bit of drama from what I've understood over the years following Mount Everest. And back in February, the Nepali government, they decided to make all of these policy changes and guidelines. You can go back to the March episode and hear a little bit more about it. I don't know how well these were implemented or not, but it caused a stir, and it's because the intentions are there. The intentions are there to put these policies and guidelines into place to make the climbing experience safer and better. The problem is that they're not implemented, and if they are, they're just not regulated. There's no consequence if you don't follow through, and there's no one who stands there and makes sure that these rules are actually followed. The beginning of May, there was some ruling made by the Nepali Supreme Court, again, almost as vague as the February document that went out and the amendment that went out in March. And again, like, it was redundant, and it was pretty much the same list as before, and with no plan to make sure that anyone followed through with it. And some of those things that were pretty memorable: climbers would be required to haul off their human waste using WAG bags. They had to use these special bags that are used to dispose of human waste. A lot of people take them out into the back country as well. It's really something that anyone who follows the Leave No Trace principles should be doing. You know, pack it in, pack it out. Size limitations on the size of tents, and no attached toilets, no businesses, massage services, bakeries, stores, and things like that on base camp or anywhere else. Which, it's funny because last year there was actually a tattoo parlor at EBC. Helicopters are banned from ferrying gear to camp, and it's because they felt that it was taking money away from the Sherpa community, who rely on this money to support their families. So even though it might be faster and even safer to use helicopters, I understand why they preferred that people be hired instead of helicopters. Visitors and trekkers are banned from sleeping at EBC, and every climber is required to carry down at least 8 kilos of garbage from the mountain. And it should be that way. There's so much garbage left on the mountain, so much gear, so much trash. You see the pictures, it's just piles of discarded debris, sleeping bags. I mean, it's just a mess. Nepal does have a history of creating rules and policies that mostly in theory would be wonderful if implemented, but there really, again, is no follow-through or regulation. Ellen did a blog post on May 3rd of this year, and he actually had like a little bit of a, not really a kind of like a cross between a spreadsheet and an infographic about some of the interesting rules and policies that had been created and that didn't really go anywhere. I recommend that you check it out. So the spring climbing season was a little bit different. The ice doctors headed out a little bit earlier than normal. Usually it's mid-March, even towards the end, and they started out on March 7th. But it's good that they started out because the icefall turned out to be a nightmare this year. The icefall doctors, they are part of the Sagarmatha Pollution Control Committee, And it's a group of Sherpas that essentially they're trained and they go to Mount Everest, and they, on the Nepali side, obviously, there's no Khumbu Icefall on the Tibetan side. And what they do is they fix the route from EBC to the other side of the Khumbu Icefall. It's been explained to me that the Khumbu Icefall is a river of flowing ice. It would be as if you're grains of salt in a bowl of popcorn, and it's constantly being shook around, and it's moving. It's always moving. And this year it was harder than normal to set up this route. They just could not put together a safe route. Once they established it, and I think it took them about a week longer than it normally does. You had to be really careful, one person at a time on the ladders. You had to carry like the bare minimum that you could. And there was constantly fixing. And that's one of the reasons why the actual climbing season started a lot later than it normally does. And part of the reason why the summits were closer to the end of May than the beginning of May. And that's it for today's episode, because I am getting close to 30 minutes and I already told you guys I wanted to keep it short. Next week, we'll kind of do a blow-by-blow of all of the summits that occurred, what records were broken, some of the fun things that happened. And of course, I'll go into even more detail about some of the scandals and craziness on Mount Everest, including, I think that they really should call it Ropegate, because I'm hearing so many different sides and everybody has an opinion about this whole situation with the ropes being cut. Were they cut? Were they not cut? I really do think that we should call it Ropegate. So until next week, thank you for listening. Climb your own climb and have a wonderful, fabulous, and safe weekend. Thank you for listening to today's episode of the All About Everest podcast. Please support this podcast by following, rating, commenting, and sharing. I appreciate your feedback, and you can find me on social media at Mama Bear Outdoors or at All About Everest podcast. Thank you for following and listening since 2022.